Welcome. What is up? Welcome to the Mixer. I'm your host, RC. I'm joined by my co-host here, Jeff from lovely Idaho. How you doing on this 420?
I'm doing good.
Awesome.
MLB the show came out. Well,
Did
if
it
you
come out
didn't
last
pay
week?
for, no. It came out last week. If you spent like $100, if you just
Mm,
bought the regular game, it came out today. Well,
uh,
last night at like midnight Eastern time.
only the 1% elitists can get it week early access. Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty much.
We are pod for the people, not elitists by any means. First things first, do not forget to like and subscribe to us anywhere you can find podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at FCYMixer on Twitter. Probably the best way to interact. Been using that account for all my twittering. Been live tweeting Potter games when I can. You know, little live bits of news here and there. So that is the best place to stay in touch. Um, let's get to our tilts. We got a content packed episode. Jeff, do you have any tilts?
Not currently. No.
Man,
Um, it's pretty easy right now. Life.
life is
So
always nice there, man.
yeah.
Nothing to tilt. Meanwhile, me on the other hand, sky's falling all the time. I mean, first things first, I could not get a top shot pack. I still not won a drop lotto. I thought, this was my chance and I missed it. I think I was in the top 50% of the queue for the first time. So moving up the list, if the simulation can help me out with securing a pack, I mean, hook it up. So lame. Um, Hopefully there'll be a new drop this week. But yeah. And then on top of that, they had like the legendary or no. Yeah, I think it was legendary and they didn't say what the requirements were beforehand. And
Okay.
I was like, maybe I should get some cheap ones because I thought like owning moments, they've done that in the past where you have to own at least 5 to be eligible. And
Right.
I had 10. Um, and I was like, well, I got my pre-order pack coming, and I thought for some reason there were 9 moments in that, but there's only 3. And then they set the requirements at 15 for the new ones, and then or for that legendary pack, and they said, you know, uh, at time of posting, you had to have 15. So anyway, but I mean that was going to be extremely unlikely. It was a small amount that got released. It was like 80,000 people qualified, and only like 3K were available. So, the drop lotto has not been kind to me anyway, or at least that's what
Yeah.
I'm telling myself. So, getting that 125K value LeBron James dunk, it was not likely in the cards. So
Yeah.
feel too bad about that one. Um, Anywho, yeah, and then I mean the other tilt is Rob versus Time. It's been a while since we touched on that. I think I'm suffering a little bit from of like maybe a precursor to a midlife crisis.
Ooh.
I'm starting to look up like herb gardens and like succulents. It's just like window shopping, well, the modern day equivalent on my phone. I'm just like, oh man. And I went to Vaughn's yesterday to get some water, and they had some succulents out, and I like
Mm.
stopped to look at them. I was like, oh man, that's a sweet little cactus. That's a nice little aloe.
There you go. See, I actually bought a few of those the other day because Samantha wants to take care of them.
Yeah.
So,
And I'm just like, why is it? What is this? What is this part of life? Like,
yeah.
why all of a sudden? Anyway, um, so yeah, man, I got like all kinds of stuff in my wish list that I'm probably never gonna get. But it's just I don't know, it's just kind of funny. So yeah, man, those are the tilts. Um, yeah, I mean, weird twists and turns in you know, the competition against time. It just grinds you down until you just want to like tend to a little shrubbery. Um,
You
maybe
got to
it's like
have some control over something, right?
maybe like being able to tend to a little plant and giving it life is like the some sort of it does some sort of psychological thing because you're physically deteriorating and becoming less full of life as time spins on. Um, whoa, I know, heavy truth bomb to drop on 420. Hopefully that um you know doesn't doesn't hit too harsh. All right, let's talk sports, shall we? Um, I'll let you decide, Jeff. You want to start baseball or do you want to start with the news that's hot in the streets right now? With Super League.
I mean, let's go Super League.
All right. So for those that don't know, the big clubs in Europe announced that. Well, I guess they didn't really announce. I don't know exactly what broke the story, but there's been kind of rumors that they were contemplating doing this. But the first thing I saw was an article in the New York Times that the big clubs, including six Premier League teams, Manchester City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Arsenal. The consensus big clubs with Tottenham sprinkled in, and some of the big teams like Real Madrid in Spain. I haven't heard anything about Barcelona, but um, maybe they just didn't make it formal. And then there were some other the Juventus, right? There were some
Yeah,
Italian teams like AC
AC
Milan,
Milan.
I believe, and there were some others, but mainly it was from the Spanish league, the Premier League, and the Italian league. Nobody from the Bundesliga, the German league, or the Paris league, the French league, Ligue 1, right? Have
Yeah,
not have not made any sort of declaration. Um, you know, I don't know if they just didn't want to put their name to it yet, but anywho, they were going to break away and instead of competing in the Champions League every year, they were going to, form this quote unquote super league where, they didn't really have the format, but basically, they would contest each other for some sort of title in that league. I would assume it would be similar to most other soccer um, formats. I mean, they might have done like a domestic thing where they just played each other twice and top of the table gets it, but they didn't make it clear. And to
right.
to entice these teams, they were going to get like 400 mil or something, or maybe it was even more than that. It's some ridiculous amount of money just for joining league, and I think that was like an annual amount that they would be getting by joining that league, and then they get a certain amount up front. And basically, the soccer world kind of went crazy because these teams are going to have all this money, and it would be unfair to the littler teams that they play in their domestic leagues. They would just be OP, right? And I mean, they already kind of are because these teams have deep pockets, but it would be even more lopsided.
Right.
Uh, so now, I'm now like UEFA and FIFA said that players on those teams are not going to be eligible for the World Cup. They might not be able to participate in domestic leagues. They might not be able to participate in domestic cups. I don't know how all those contracts work and how, they aren't able to do that. I would assume there'd be a lot of court cases in a lot of different countries and it'd be a very complex knot to untie, but that's where we're at. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this huge news?
Yeah. You know, I did hear one thing about it that these teams are threatening this to get like the Champions League to give out multi-year qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
Because like as we've seen with some of these teams, especially in recent years, the Premier League or like Real Madrid right now, I think or Juventus is like 2 points away from not qualifying for Champions League next year or something like that.
Oof.
Um, I saw somebody put out that these teams really want like multi-year qualifications. So like if you win the Champions League, essentially it would give you like a 10-year exemption into the Champions League, right?
Yeah.
If you come in second, it would be like a 5-year exemption. And depending on where you finish, you would get, as long as you got to like the final 16, you would get multi-year exemptions or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I actually don't think is a bad idea. I think if you do that, though, you probably have to expand the Champions League to include
Yeah.
more teams,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is probably fine anyway. So I was reading that. I don't know how true that is. I don't know, where it actually falls into play there. But if that's the reason why they're doing this, then I would hope UEFA would just, kind of sack up and say, all right, we'll figure it out. Like,
Mm-hmm.
here's some exemptions kind of thing. Because for me personally, it doesn't ruin soccer, but it ruins a lot of it because it in this Super League competition would have a lot less value to me other than like, oh cool, it's the big name teams, but like actually winning it, like you're not doing anything to get there other than you got invited when it got started.
Yeah.
Which is really kind of opposite of the way soccer acts most of the time. Soccer, even in England, if you're a fifth league team, you can play a Premier League team in the FA Cup or whatever, right? Like as long as you make it far enough.
Yeah.
You can win the Champions League as long as you qualify for it. But this Super League, only the 14 teams that are invited would have a chance at it. And that's the
Right.
disappointing part. Like it kind of goes against the way soccer's been, created and groomed for the last, I don't know, long time.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the disappointment for me. Also too, like I brought up, I don't know the long-term effects, but like, what if you're granted like the money will be better and this and that for these teams for a little while at least, but like, what if you're bad in the Super League for 5 years in a row? Like, what do you do? Like, are you going to get kicked out at some point? Right. Like, how does that
You're
help you?
asking,
Like,
is Tottenham going to be the first team relegated from the
I mean, not even, but
the
like,
hypothetical Super League?
but I mean, hypothetically, if you're Tottenham and let's say you're finishing, fourth, fifth, sixth every year in the Premier League and you're finishing dead last in the Super League, how does that help you? Like,
They get tendies. They get 400 mil a year,
I mean, I
so
guess, but
they're
if
able
you're
to
not
keep
doing anything
Gareth
with it,
Bale.
but I don't know. I guess it just kind of like that's a view of mine there. I don't know. I also enjoy the Champions League. It's a lot of fun. It
Yeah.
also seems weird that the German and the French teams aren't included. And I'm sure that's like they decided not to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But, if you're going to make a league like this, how do you do it without 2 to 3 or 4 of the best teams in the world? Like
Yeah.
Bayern and PSG are always near the top. Dortmund has been recently, right? So you're essentially leaving 3 of the best teams in the world out by creating this league. So like, how does your league have credibility at that point?
Yeah. My
That's
Yeah, I was just gonna say my initial thoughts when hearing about the Super League was, this sounds dope. Like you're gonna throw all these powerhouses against each other, and we're gonna get prime time games. We're gonna see the teams that you want to see because with the Champions League, you don't always get those big matchups. It's a bunch of
right.
group play against like the teams that finished third in the Spanish league, or a lot of like the French teams too.
Hmm.
I mean, in recent years they've been better, but usually it's just PSG, and like they're the only ones that, are awesome. And then
Right.
there's smaller leagues like the Irish league, the Dutch league, and they all get a team or two in the Champions League. So a lot of the early games are not the big name teams. Um, so I mean, I thought at first it sounded awesome, and then not to mention Super League. Um, I mean, is it possible to come up with a better league name?
With the worst league name?
La Liga Super. Dude, it just sounds dope. Um, but then you know all this, the outcry afterwards, and how it's ruining the sport, and it's because Americans are finally paying attention to soccer that now we're
Right.
ruining it. And I mean that has to do with like the financing behind what's going on, which I haven't looked into too much, but I'll
Right.
take these people, these reporters at their word that it is at least in part due to American investors' influence. So Jeff, are we the baddies?
I mean, yes and no. I
Am
mean, a
I the
lot of
baddie for thinking La Liga Super sounded super, and you know and just the idea of the league in general sounded sweet at first?
I so I do think the league sounds cool depending on the format. Like
Hmm.
if you're just giving me like if you're giving me the 26 games, right? Because I think it's 14 teams that have been announced. So if you're giving me 26 games, a home and away against each team, I'm in for that. If you're just telling me like they're going to play 13 games, like in some kind of like single elimination tournament or whatever, I haven't heard anything about a format.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm as into that, right? Like I kind of like you, like I would love to see these teams play each other every year, right? And that's the appeal. But if they're not playing every team, like the appeal is kind of lost because I can see this in the Champions League. Well, with most of the teams, some teams like, you know, Spurs and United and uh, Arsenal don't always get far enough to play these other guys. But
Right.
um, but you know what I mean. Like I if we're just going to see them play, once a year, or maybe, if like Arsenal plays Real Madrid every third year, well,
Hmm.
I don't care about that as much, right?
Yeah.
But if you're playing twice a year, I'm definitely more into it. As far as Americans go, America carries a lot of weight because we watch a lot of stuff. And
We
if
do
you
carry
can
a lot of weight as well, like literal
get,
weight.
that's true too. But if you can get American eyes on it, it it's a lot of money.
It's an untapped market.
So yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised if we are kind of the reason behind it. Um, I think it's JP Morgan Chase is the one funding the initial like $3 billion or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah,
It all comes back
the,
around to Ted Lasso.
I haven't watched that yet,
I
but I've
knew
heard
I
very
didn't.
good things about it.
What's that comedian's name? The SNL guy. Why can't I think of his name? Jason Sudeikis? Something
Yeah,
Sudeikis.
that's the one.
Is it Jason Sudeikis?
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, nailed it. I don't know why his humor. I mean he's funny. You know how some people just don't like Will Ferrell and they're like he's funny, but
Yeah.
I just don't like his humor. Like I feel like
Yeah.
I have that towards that guy. Like I still laugh at his stuff, but like there's just something that I don't know.
I
I
mean, I
can't
do
put a
that with
finger
Will
on it.
with Vince Vaughn. I'm not a Vince Vaughn fan, but he's in some funny stuff.
Ah, man, come on. Anyway, enough about bad comedian takes. Hand up. That's probably one of my worst ones. And yeah, I mean, I can see why some people don't like Vince Vaughn. But anywho, um, so I mean, the tipping point in the scale, because I was kind of like, well, Super League, like let's roll, let's do this, let's let's get this thing going. But then I heard my man Troops from Barstool Sports back again. Um, he was talking about how these teams are just going to have a huge unfair advantage. If they're getting that 400 mil extra of cash flow every year, um,
Right.
if they were allowed to compete in their domestic league, the it would just ruin it because they'd be playing against like Aston Villa and freaking Burnley and Newcastle, like a team like Newcastle that was great once, and has been kind of struggling to get back up. That they just would not be able to recover from it.
Right.
They just be the minnows. That I mean, they can develop their youth talent, but anybody that's good, they would just sell off to these teams that had these deeper pockets. So yeah, it just wouldn't work. So the only way it would really work is if those teams just left those domestic leagues completely. Um, and yeah, I mean, they, and just really did their own thing. Like it would just have to be something completely different, and that just kind of sucks because these teams have been staples in these leagues that go way back. I mean, the Premier League was called something else. I think it was just called like First Division or something like that. They
Yeah.
used to have more, you know, they're I would say, they were kind of on the metric system, which is way better than the US standard system. We'll just get that out there. We are a metric system podcast, but for the naming, it was like First Division, Second Division, and they didn't have the branding, but now like, maybe that's American influence as well. Now they do kind of have it, have having a more official sound like the Premier League. But um but yeah, and to lose those teams, it would just ruin it for the fans. There's the rivalries. A lot of those teams are in the same city. Like, there's a whole bunch of teams in London. Like, it's not just
Hmm.
Arsenal and Tottenham. Is Chelsea in London?
Yeah.
Um,
Hmm.
and then there's like, I mean, I can't think of them, but there's like two or three other small clubs that when they play, that they're it's a rivalry game. It's in London. Yeah, it's not like the big team, so it's not as huge of a rivalry, but to those
Right.
fans in those little communities, it would just be, to take that away is, to get an even bigger paycheck when these teams are, making tons and tons of money. So I agree with you. Like, why don't they just expand the Champions League so these teams qualify? Because, usually they do get a payout. It's I don't know that it's 400 mil, but they do get revenue from additional ticket sales in the Champions League, and then plus I think they do get a certain lump sum payout for qualifying for the Champions League. Um, and just preserving the sport, because
Hmm.
if you do a cash grab like this up front, you're gonna, they're basically like cashing in their investments that they built the brand on, and if they, if they hodl in the same league, like I think it's just better in the long run. So I don't know. It's fascinating stuff. Sports conferences and all this used to be more common, I would say, when these leagues were forming, I mean, with the NFL, they had it recently, or not, I mean, relatively recently with the AFL and NFL merger way
Yeah.
back. They've had competitors in the past. I mean, every time like the freaking XFL starts up, or what was the Lions Football League, right? So, I mean, it's tried to happen before, not on this scale. So I'm interested to see how it plays out, but I hope they, I hope they just back out. It may be there can be some sort of compromise reached.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I agree with you.
yeah, and I mean we've said it before on the podcast that like the European setup is the way European soccer is set up is it's the best like sport format in that during the COVID lockdowns, we were saying like maybe more sports will try to get to this format to set up like little tournaments. And we talked about basketball. They've kind of flirted with the idea. So anyway, we'll see
Right.
what comes from it, but very interesting stuff. And just to touch on, what's actually going on the pitch, as the kids say. Um, we have some Champions League setups right now. It's the semis, and we have Real Madrid up against Chelsea, and then PSG against Man City. So some really heavy hitters there. We have two prominent U.S. men's national teams player, Pulisic for Chelsea, and Weston McKinnie, who's at Real Madrid. I believe he's on loan from somebody. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, so that's gonna be awesome to see in the same semis. So we're gonna have a U.S. player in the final, regardless of the outcome, because they're paired up against each other.
There you go.
I mean, what's your? I mean, who you got in the finals, man? We don't talk soccer too much, but we've actually played soccer together. It's the one team you and I have been, participated in. So what's your thoughts, man?
I really hope Chelsea makes the final because Pulisic at times when he's healthy is very impactful for them. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it would be awesome having an American in the final that's actually really impactful.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's my goal there. What's the other matchup? It's I
PSG
don't
and
know.
Man City. It's the Messi free agent bowl.
Oh
He's
yeah.
been rumored to both these teams, so
Um,
seems like Man City's more likely. But anyway, that's a little storyline I
well,
think fits.
that's because I think that's because City has Messi's favorite coach, but
Does
um,
yeah. I guess
I
so.
out of those two, I would much rather have PSG win, so Mbappe can embrace the final and ascend
Yeah.
again. Um, although he hasn't been quiet in the sense of like he's been really good. He's been hurt a
Mm-hmm.
couple of times since the World Cup, so we haven't heard about him as often recently.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I kind of want his name back on the big stage again. He's a fun guy.
Yeah. Um, I mean, same page. I want Chelsea to get through. Although I like McKinney. Not a huge Real Madrid fan. Even without Ronaldo there. God, man, it just feels so dirty rooting for Chelsea. But I mean, you got to do what you got to do. And then PSG with Mbappe. Seeing that matchup would be awesome. And then, just again, not a huge fan of Manchester City. So, I mean, you heard that here first. We both pick PSG and Chelsea to be in the final. So bet the house on Real Madrid and Man City, and you'll probably
Pretty
do well.
much.
The other piece of soccer news while we're touching on it, I actually had all this like the Champions League stuff in the next topic, which is the Gold Cup. In the show plans before the big Super League news broke, but I don't know if you saw it recently, but your second home away from home. Are we your home away from home, or is Vegas your home away from home? So people want to know.
San Diego.
Okay. So Vegas is number 3 for the brand. So
Yeah,
that's good. That's
exactly.
good. Vegas feels like my home away from. Well, Mammoth is actually my home away from home. So yeah, I would say Vegas is the third too. Um, but the Gold Cup final is going to be at the Death Star or whatever the nickname is for the Las Vegas Raiders stadium. Um, the U.S. has the World Cup in 2026.
Mm-hmm.
Could you see? Are we going to have a World Cup final in Vegas? The thought hadn't even crossed my mind until I saw this Gold Cup final announcement.
I think it'll depend on how the Gold Cup goes.
Yeah.
But I actually think Vegas is a pretty good spot to have it, other than don't do it in the middle of summer,
Yeah.
right? Or
Well,
if
it's
you do it,
indoor.
kind of thing. True. But Vegas is a great spot. A lot of people are used to going there for vacations. It can handle a lot of people, right? Like it's built for that. It's not like going to, not that San Diego can't handle tourism or not that LA can't, but like they're not really designed for that. They're
Mm.
bigger, more spread out. Whereas Vegas, I mean, everyone just stays on the strip and the stadium's right across the freeway. You get shuttled to the stadium or grab an Uber or whatever, walk to it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a perfect setup there. So I would love to see the final there. I think it'd be great. Um, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think it could happen if the Gold Cup final goes well.
Looking at the group draw, the U.S. It looks like they're going to be on the same side of the bracket as Mexico. So it should it. I mean, it depends. They still got to play the games, and it depends on if they're a 1 or 2 seed. But but just looking at the bracket, maybe one of those. Anyway, I'm just saying that might not be the final. We'll have to see. But I'm
Right.
looking forward to it, man. I can't, do big sporting events until the baby is vaccinated. But if they're going to have the Gold Cup final in Vegas, we got some tangential family there. Well, I mean, my brother-in-law, I wouldn't really call him tangential, but it's yeah, I would love to get out there to watch even a Gold Cup final. Um, yeah, man.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it's, big scene coming up in Vegas. All right, let's move on. Oh, and why the heck did they invite Qatar? I mean, I know they're hosting the World Cup, but I mean, is that just what happens when you got, big oil money? You can just buy your way into the Gold Cup.
Pretty much. You could
All
buy your
right.
way into anything if you got that.
Cash is king. Lewis Hamilton. Drive to Survive. Speaking of Formula One, that's our next topic. So we had the Grand Prix of Imola. I mean, it wasn't called that. It was called like the Emilia Romagna GP d'Italia or something crazy. Um, it was a wet race, dry qualifying. Hamilton got pole. Verstappen got second. No, Perez got second.
No,
That was the
Perez
big
got second,
surprise.
Verstappen third. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you had the 2 Red Bulls coming after Lewis for the first time in a while. Um, it was a wet start. Um, it was a pretty impressive sight to see those cars coming down that narrow kind of old school track. And I mean it was chaotic in the first runnings. There was, they were having to switch between inters, full wets, and dries. And then we got to about the midpoint of the race. Bottas had been struggling with his tires. He was running down in 8th. George Russell in a Williams. No, you didn't mishear that. George Russell in a Williams got in to Bottas' slipstream, pulled alongside him. Bottas kind of moved towards the center of the track to make Russell go the longer way around. And Russell's tires hit the grass. He spun. He hit Bottas. and both crashed out. After the crash, Russell, very mad, Bottas, shaken. You can hear him over the radio.
Also very mad.
Yeah, making old man grunting noise. I mean, it sounded like me waking up on a night after drinking. Oh yeah, by the way, free advice, another tilt that I forgot to mention. Don't do hangovers with a toddler. Man, those are, I don't know what I was thinking. I was asking for trouble Friday night. After that Padre game, maybe we got to touch on that still. But anyway, Russell came over, you know, shouted at Bottas. Bottas still concussed. Flipped him the bird. Bottas kind of patted him on the head, and later apologized for his actions. But what's your take on this coming together of Bottas and Russell, who wants that seat?
Yeah, I think both guys are kind of in the wrong here. George was in a position he's not used to being in, right? Like Williams recently in his career has not been very good. His usual weekend highlights are getting to Q2. So him being in ninth or having a chance to get to ninth, right? I forget what position they were actually fighting for, but it was around there. Yeah, so he saw an opportunity. It's a tough spot to pass. He decided to go around the outside. Bottas, George wasn't wrong. Bottas does make a little move to the right. I think where, George is wrong is I don't think he realized how much room there was between the two cars, which is tough. You're going, 200 miles an hour or close to it. So like if you think that there's not enough room, maybe that's why George moved a little bit right. His tire hit the wet grass, spun him, right into Bottas, whatever. He wasn't wrong in that Bottas moved to the right. I think where he was wrong is I think he thought there was less room than there actually was between the two cars. And Bottas, for his part in it, didn't need to move. I don't know if he like saw George late or something and he was like, oh, I'm going to block it, and then realized, wait, I can't, kind of thing. Don't really know. He hasn't explained why he made that move. His side was just that like there was room for both cars. There was no need to like do that kind of thing. And then obviously afterwards, like George goes over and taps Bottas on the head. Bottas flips him off. Toto basically said that it was George's fault, which is interesting considering Toto's the one that runs Mercedes and all that. But it's tough. I think it's one of those where like I think George ultimately is at fault. But I understand his side, like his point of view. And then George was also involved, not really involved, but around Lewis's fuck up, if you remember that. Lewis
happened shortly before the Russell and Bottas accident.
Yeah, Lewis even mentioned after the race that he rushed that pass, right? Like he could have waited, but he was just trying to get through as quickly as possible. But yeah, it's funny that like George was around both Mercedes when they were, messing up. But overall, like George was running a great race, especially in that Williams. And it sucks that he didn't get to finish it. Valtteri was running probably the worst race he's run in a while. He kept complaining he couldn't get his tires warm or whatever. I think it was his big complaint on the day. But yeah, I mean, overall, I enjoyed the race a lot. Yeah.
I'm sure. I think what played a huge role in both Hamilton and Bottas and Russell's coming together is that, I mean, these cars are not built for this track. This is a track that's being added on due to COVID restrictions in Europe. Certain countries have restrictions where it's just not practical for 11 Formula One teams with 60 crew on each one to travel internationally.
Right.
So the track is narrow. It's a very historic track. However, this was designed when cars were much shorter wheelbase. I mean, if you're curious, just look at a Formula One car. I mean, just probably Google, Formula One wheelbase comparisons. And the last time they regularly raced at this track was in the 90s. I think they had a few races in the early 2000s, but a much shorter wheelbase. And it's also, tracks nowadays are wider. So it making it harder to pass, which is why Hamilton, after a pit stop in a mixed condition race, is trying to push it, get ahead of guys that he's much faster than, having to get stuck behind him and lose time. And similar for Bottas, he doesn't want to get passed. It's that much harder to overtake, even with a superior car. And also, when he moved to the right, he's used to doing something similar on tracks that are wider, tracks with asphalt runoff, where if you push a guy over the paint, it's a curb or asphalt and not grass or gravel. But yeah, man, I love the combination here with a wet race, cars that are too big, mixed conditions, and it just jumbled things up, and it made it for an entertaining race. Hamilton charged back. I think it was just the timing of his pit stop and the accident where, after the red flag for the Bottas incident, he was, down in ninth or something. And actually a lap down because it's a short track and the pits. Anyway,
Hold on real quick.
He was able to climb back into second, and it was awesome.
Mercedes conspiracy theory here. Toto made the call and had George take Valtteri out to cause a red flag to allow Lewis to get back on the lead lap to give him a chance to come back and get second.
Yeah. I mean,
I think
that's a hell of a
conspiracy. They don't care about those 9. They don't care about those 2 points from 9. Like,
yeah, man. I like where your head's at, but yeah, entertaining stuff. Verstappen ends up winning. He's got the lead in the championship for the first time in his career.
He does not.
Huh?
He's a point behind Lewis.
Ah, okay.
Lewis got fastest lap.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's close. He's close. The Ferraris ran well. Lando Norris ran really well. Was able to, get a podium. He was running second for the majority of the latter half of the race until Hamilton caught up. I mean, Hamilton and Verstappen seem miles faster than any other drivers in car comparison. Hopefully Perez can get it together. He's had some bad luck, but I'd like to see him, filling out the podium at least. And
Perez, he looks like he can handle that Red Bull significantly better than like Gasly or Albon did. Mm-hmm. At least like over short distances.
Yeah.
Obviously it's only 2 races so far, but he doesn't look as competent race-wise as Max. But I have to say too, I think those Red Bulls, and I heard this on Drive to Survive, those Red Bulls got to be hard to drive. Like, they give everyone problems, it seems like, unless your name's Max, basically.
Yeah, well, I think the big teams, you see it with Bottas struggling too. I think they're just so finely tuned for Hamilton and Verstappen, like they just don't know what to do to make it work for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it's been exciting. I'm not sure where they go next on the calendar, but we will have more Formula One coverage as the season
It's
goes.
another. It's a 2-week break, I think, right?
Yeah, and they are going to Portugal, um, which they had the race at last year that was kind of similar to this one. So, a lot of elevation change, a little bit old school feel on that track. Portimao. I'm excited for that
Yeah.
race. A little boring aesthetically, but the layout of the track and the elevation change is pretty awesome. So, yeah, we're looking forward to that. Let's touch on the Padres real quick. Well, the MLB in general, but primarily focusing on the Padres. We had the Padres Dodgers series. The Padres were able to win Game 3. Dodgers won Game 1 and 2 pretty dramatically. I mean, Game 3 was pretty dramatic. The Padres were able to come back, but the big game was the Friday game. A lot of back and forth. Tatis hit a home run. Also committed some errors, some throwing errors, which opened things up for the Dodgers. Jeff, did you catch that game or the Saturday game, or what are your thoughts on the series as a whole?
So I'll be honest, have not watched much baseball yet this year. Um, with my Yankees doing about as bad as they've done in my lifetime, uh, I'm avoiding it. Also, our YouTube TV hadn't changed our home area, so a lot of the Charger games had been like blacked out for us so far.
You mean the Padre games?
Or the Padre games? I mean, sorry,
They're
I'm
blacked
used
out
to
for people
football
here
games
too.
being black. No, but that's why, because my home area was still San Diego
Ah,
on YouTube TV. But now that it's changed to Boise, I can get them a lot of times. So I did watch a little bit of the Sunday game, right? It was Sunday. Um, the series as a whole was good. Um, it was interesting to see people reacting on Twitter. You had Dodger fans who seem to be like, "Oh, Padre fans, why are you getting so excited over this? It's just a series, right?" But then you see the Dodger players, like Mookie makes a great play and is like
yeah.
super fired up about it, right? So it's kind of like one of those. If the players are going to get that fired up, these two teams know they're probably going to see each other. They're obviously going to see each other more times throughout the year, but they're probably going to see each other in the playoffs too, right?
Mhm.
So it reminds me of some of those like Yankee Red Sox uh, seasons in the past where like
That
they were
were
just the
always
two
on
best teams in
ESPN.
baseball. Yeah, but they're like the two best teams in baseball, and so it's the only series that really matter is like
Mhm.
playing those guys, right? So yeah, I mean it's fun to watch. Both teams are really, really good, and I think it'll be 16 more times this year. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, they start another series Thursday in LA. So, I mean, it's been the Padres started out with some cupcakes on the schedule. They more or less handled their business. They could have won one more game in Pittsburgh. They probably should have won another one against the Giants. So, um, but they have more wins than anybody but the Dodgers. I think the Mariners and maybe in Boston. I mean, if you look at teams like the Yankees, the Braves, there are some teams that the Devil Rays. There are some teams with some expectations, and they are stuck on 5 or 6 wins. So, I mean, it's early days. It was rough to see the Padres lose the way they did on Friday, and then with Mookie getting that diving catch on Saturday. I mean, you missed it in the chat, but he's on my fantasy team. I said, Jeff, do I get extra points for that? Because I mean, in our league, we just
I
get.
didn't miss that. I saw it, but I
Oh,
ignored
okay.
it.
And I was kind of trolling all the Padre fans too because like I know they were devastated, so it's just like I thought it'd be funny. Anyway, um, but yeah, man, I don't know if I can take it these games, I mean, they did feel like playoff games. I don't think I've ever been on the edge of my seat for April baseball. And I mean, I was stressing, um, and for them to lose those two, and then they lost last night to the Brewers. It's like, oh man, it's gonna be such a grind getting to 162 games, with the emotions this high. So, I mean, we'll have to follow the progress on that, but yeah, more tilts are coming. Hopefully, like the Padres have been getting their wins with guys like Hosmer and Profar and Cronenworth and even Grisham, paired with good pitching. So, hopefully when Tatis gets in his groove, Myers gets back in his groove, and Machado even, he's been doing like, what you'd expect from him, but he hasn't been, he's not peak Machado right now where he's on
Yeah.
fire. So I think there's some good runs coming. Hopefully they get the pitching situation sorted out with Dinelson Lament coming back, and that trash panda Paddock can maybe get sent down. Anyway, and shouts to Ryan Weathers making his debut start on Friday. He pitched awesome. I think he almost went 4 innings, but yeah, man, I'm excited for that kid. I mean, Ohtani's been balling out. That was the one other note on MLB. Do you have anything else on baseball, Jeff, before we wrap this thing?
Not really. It's still so early in the season too. Like we're what, in week 3,
Mhm.
right? So it's kind of, really too early to say a lot. But it is nice to see the Padres off to a good start, considering the expectations, right? So it's nice to see that they're kind of matching those at least.
Yeah, and it was also awesome just to see everybody on Twitter. I mean, there were East Coasters staying up till like 2 a.m. to watch that game on Friday and saying like, I saw Patrick Doherty, who's a fantasy sports analyst for formerly for Roto World,
Formerly Rotor World.
now NBC Sports Edge or whatever, just the rebranded Roto World. He said San Diego is one of those places that we need to get open as soon as possible, for that sports experience, and that's not something that the East Coast elites would have said in the past. So that's encouraging, and yeah, man, I'm excited. Hopefully the Padres end up on the winning end more often, but yeah, it should be a fun year. All
Definitely.
right. So it might be back later this week. Anything before we get out of here, Jeff?
Uh, PF Chang's.
Let's get some PF Changs. All right, man. Have a good one.
You too.
Bye, everyone.